On September 15, 1868, a 125-foot sailing ship disappeared beneath Lake Erie. 8 men were aboard. Only one survived. His name was Rush Reed, and what happened next would become one of the most remarkable survival stories in the history of the Great Lakes. The ship was called the Clough. Built in Ohio just 1 year earlier, she was a working sailing vessel carrying a massive cargo of stone across Lake Erie. But on that September day, the weather suddenly turned dangerous. A powerful gust pushed against the vessel. Then something went terribly wrong. The heavy stone cargo shifted across the ship. The Clough began to tilt. The crew fought desperately to bring her back under control, but the weight had already pushed the ship beyond recovery. Within a short time, water began rushing aboard. The crew had almost no chance. The Clough slipped beneath the waves of Lake Erie. 7 men were lost, but one man refused to disappear with the ship. Rush Reed, the vessel's first mate, somehow made it into the open water. And then began the part of the story that sounds almost impossible. For roughly 36 hours, Reed remained in Lake Erie. No modern rescue equipment, no radio, no emergency beacon. Just one exhausted man surrounded by cold, open water. Imagine looking in every direction and seeing nothing but the lake. Hour after hour passed. His strength was disappearing. The cold was relentless. And yet, somehow, Rush Reed survived. Eventually, rescuers found him. He had survived an ordeal that should have been fatal. But the story of the Clough did not end that day. The ship itself vanished beneath Lake Erie. For generations, nobody knew exactly where she had gone. The Clough became one of those lost chapters of Great Lakes history. A ship whose final resting place remained hidden beneath the water. More than a century passed. Then, decades later, a group of divers, historians, and maritime researchers began searching for lost shipwrecks across Lake Erie. They weren't looking for treasure, they were looking for history. For years, the team searched enormous stretches of lake bed using sonar, underwater surveys, and historical records. The search eventually covered roughly 250 miles. And then they found something. Deep beneath the surface was the wreck of an old sailing vessel. But finding a wreck wasn't enough. They had to prove what it was. Researchers compared the ship's dimensions with historical records. They studied the remains of its cargo. They examined the hull. They looked at the missing masts. And then they found one extraordinary clue. The hull contained evidence of a metal patch that matched historical records about repairs made to the Clough before its final voyage. Piece by piece, the evidence began to fit. The mystery finally had an answer. The wreck on the lake bed was the Clough. After more than 150 years underwater, the lost ship had finally been identified. But the discovery was bittersweet. The researchers had solved the mystery, but they were also remembering the 7 men who never came home. And there was another remarkable connection to the discovery. One of the explorers involved in the search, David Van Zandt, died during a diving accident in 2024 while working at a newly discovered wreck in the same area. His fellow explorers continued the identification work, and eventually they completed what they had started. Today, the Clough rests beneath Lake Erie. Its wooden hull, steering wheel, and other features remain underwater, silent witnesses to what happened in 1868. But perhaps the most incredible part of this story isn't the shipwreck. It's the man who survived it. Rush Reed spent approximately 36 hours in the open waters of Lake Erie and lived to tell the story. One ship disappeared. 7 men were lost. One man survived. And 158 years later, the Clough finally came back into history. What do you think it was like to spend 36 hours alone in Lake Erie? Would you have survived? Let us know in the comments. And subscribe to the Mystery Files US for more incredible survival stories, forgotten mysteries, and true stories from American history.